So we're learning the sugya of Bורer, which is a fascinating, huge sugya. But which sugya is not fascinating and not huge? So regarding Meleches Bורer, the Biur Halacha, in the very beginning of Shin Yutes brings the Yeshuas Yankov. And the Yeshuas Yankov has a chakira. What is the essence of Meleches Bורer? I explained to you many times that when we deal with the malachas of Shabbos, Reishis Chayvoseinu, first of all, we need to define the malacha. What is the Haggadah? And if we have the definition, if we have the Haggadah, it is far easier to understand the specifics, the halachas. Everything starts with a fundamental essence, the fundamental Haggadah. So the Yeshuas Yankov and the Biur Halacha are done. Is it hafroda or tikkun? Is it hafroda, separation? That is the essence. And in a few minutes, we will talk about separating what? Separating oichel from psoilus, or separating one thing from another, one type of oichel from another type of oichel. But even before we deal with the question, what type of separation, the Yeshuas Yankov and the Biur Halacha deal, maybe Bórer is not about separation, but about tikkun. Tikkun hu oichel. And one of the types of tikkun, when you take raw materials off the field or out of the bush, whether it's menachai or tzameach, there are many stages of tikkun until the food is fitting for consumption. Koitzer, ma'amer, zorer, bórer, meraket, lash, oifa. Each of these is another stage of tikkun until finally we have food on our plate. And the same is min hachai, tzad, shoichet, mafshit, mevashel. So is it hafroda or tikkun? And the Yeshuas Yankov brings the Yerushalmi, Daf Memtes, Shabbos Memtes, and Medbeis Mashmam Yerushalmi, that the Shiur of Bórer is egrogeres. And the Yeshuas Yankov's Medak from Yerushalmi, egrogeres of taroivis, egrogeres of oichel and psoilus together, not egrogeres of oichel la'achar habrera. And from this Yerushalmi, the Yeshuas Yankov wants to prove that the malacha is not separating. It's not hafroda, but rather tikkun. What is he mitaken? He's mitaken what he deals with. He's mitaken the taroivis. After the tikkun, what he has is less than a grogeres. But that proves it's tikkun. If it would be separating oichel from psoilus, you would need a grogeres of the oichel. V'ledidi pshitali. Regardless of what the Haggadah is, we need a grogeres of oichel. And the diuk fin Yerushalmi is not a diuk gomer. Yerushalmi says that the shiur is a grogeres. But in my understanding, milsa de pshita, grogeres oichel after brera. And if I would have my way, I would say the Haggadah of Meleches Bórer is tikkun al yedei hafroda. Tikkun by separation. Of course, it's tikkun. All the malachas are tikkun. Seder hapas, seder huor. It's all about tikkun. All the lamites malachas have one goal, one objective, one basic hagdora, tikkun. So when you're dealing with tzameach, various stages of tikkun, from zriya till you have food on your plate. Dealing with oichel menachai, the same. From tzeda till you have meat or fish on your plate. And the same is by boina and soiser and koiser, they're all tikkun. But just like mevashel is tikkun hadover b'choim hu eish, Bórer is tikkun hadover al yedei hafroda. So tikkun is the fundamental yesod. But that yesod is the same by all the lamatas malachas. It's not unique to Beider. And therefore, Ani Akoton v'Hadal b'Yisrael disagree with etzem chakira. Tikkun is the fundamental definition of all the lamatas malachas. But each of the lamatas malachas has its unique definition, which sets it apart from all the others. What type of a tikkun? And Beider is hafrod. And that is why we need a grogeres from the oichel la'achar hasoras hapsoilis. My chakir is a different one, separating what? Is oichel and psoilis the essence of meleches Beider? Or no? It is separating one mean, memin acher. Lav dafka oichelen. The Taz makes it clear in Shin Yutes. And it's Gemoras. Ayin dala do mit beis. Haimanda ovet chavuta. Haimanda ovet tanura. Of course, there's oichel not only ba'oichelen. So the fundamental question to me would be, is it all about oichel v'psoilis? Or is it Beider min mishe'enoi minoi? Min memin acher. So you learn Tosfos Ayin Daled Omed Aleph. Tosfos writes, even if both are oichelen, Beider min memin acher chayev mishum Beider. Why? Because masha roitze lechel is oichel, masha einoi roitze lechel is psoilis. Loshen Tosfos is mashma. It's all about oichel and psoilis. Beider is Tikkun al yedei hafrodas oichel mipsoilis. Just like Zoira is oichel and psoilis. What is Zoira? Winnowing. Like dash, breaking the stalks and bringing out the oichel, the grain. Zoira, after disha. Winnowing. You throw it into the wind. The wind blows away the psoilis and you're left with the oichel. So Tosfos is mashma, shnei minei oichlen. Why is it Beider? Roitze lechel is oichel, ein roitze is psoilis. However, adayin yesh lach koyer. Maybe it's all about shnei minim. So why does Tosfos needs to explain roitze lechel is oichel, ein roitze lechel is psoilis? Because we need to know psoilis metich oichel is also, oichel metich psoilis. Biyad la'alter is mutar. So we need to know which is oichel, which is psoilis. But not necessarily because that is the essence of the malacha. I think this question is a machlokes the Ramah and the Taz, Shin Yutes Siv Beis. The Ramah writes, there is no Beider elo b'shnei minei oichlen. But if you have fish, and it's Beider chatichas gedolis metoich haktanos, so you have guests, and you want to mechubedik a portion for each and every one of them. So you take out the nice big pieces that didn't disintegrate, they didn't fall apart, and those are the ones you want to mechabed your guests, you want to put on the table. So it's min echod. It's all the same type of fish. It's all salmon, it's all carp, or whatever it is. But you want the big pieces separated from the small pieces. According to the Ramah, that's not Beider. The Taz says it is, based on Tosfos. The ones that he wants are oichel. The ones that he doesn't want is psoilis. In my understanding, according to the Taz, it's all about oichel and psoilis. So there would be no difference by the fact that it's all fish. It's the same type. Doesn't make a difference. Es shehi roitze is oichel, es she'eino roitze is psoilis. So according to the Taz, it's all about oichel and psoilis. The Ramah says no. It's about min, memin, acher. Chatichas gedolos, chatichas ketanas are not two different things. The relevance of oichel and psoilis is only to paskin, which do you take out and which do you leave? Muter livre oichel metech psoilis, not psoilis metech oichel. But the essence of Beider is shnei minim, min, memin, acher. And that is why it's all fish, there would be no issue. That's the way I understand the machlokes that are more in the Taz. And the Taz l'shitosoi, lefi darki, sifkot yud beis. When we learn in the Shulchan Aruch, when you separate the chelman from the chelboin in an egg, the yellow yolk from the white outer part of the egg, that's not boiler. And the reason it's not boiler is he only wants it mishum mara. And therefore, there is no eichelim psoilus. And that is the way the Taz explains it. Chelmoin v'chelboin, we cannot say which is eichel, which is psoilus. But it definitely is two different things. This is one section, one part of the baits, and this is another. It's not like fish. They're all the same. Taz l'shitosoi. But if there is no way to define which is eichel and which is psoilus, there is no boiler. So according to the Taz, the Agdora, the basic definition, the basic Agdora is boiler, eichel metoch psoilus. The Ramos says no. Boiler mi mishein aminoi. So what does Tosfos need to say? B'shnei mine eichel yesh boiler. Oisei sheloitza is eichel, oisei shein loitza is psoilus, because in the practical halachas of boiler, we need to define which is eichel, which is psoilus. Because muter livra eichel metoch psoilus, also livra psoilus metoch eichel. Prima Godem is Mesupik, and the Bialacha brings the suffix as well. Miyun. I don't know what the translation of miyun is in English, but it is not separating when we wish to eat one part and not to eat the other, but rather we just wish to separate and we wish to eat both parts. So you have an assortment of nuts. Some people like almonds, the other will want the chestnuts or the walnuts or whatever it is, or the peanuts. So we want to separate, and we're going to put them on the table, two separate dishes. It's not that we want this and we don't want that. We want them both, but we just want them separated. Or better, by eating utensils. So you have a bowl of spoons, tablespoons, teaspoons, forks, knives, everything mixed together, everything thrown together, and we want to separate them, and we want to use them all. So is that boiler or not? I just saw a note on my screen that miyun would be selection. Yeah, maybe. So it's not that we want one and we want to put the other aside. No. We need the spoons and the forks and the knives, and we want to use them all, but we just want to separate them, and next to every plate on the table to have the utensils that he needs to use that are designated for him. Or as the mashal I gave before, you have nuts. You have an assortment of nuts, but we want to put on the table the almonds on one plate and the peanuts in another plate. Would that be an Isser of Boiler? So once again, if the essence of boiler is eichel and psoilus, that would be mutar lechatchila. Because we're not dealing with eichel and psoilus. We're dealing with eichel and eichel. We want to use both sides. But if the essence of boiler is min acher, then that would be boiler. That would be boiler. Because after all, you're separating and selecting one min from another min. So this is a machlokes. And we are machmir kedivrei Taz, but I don't think there's a hachra brura to yesodas dikedrachim to understand the essence of malachas boiler. Lo kedivrei hayeshuas Yankev. The question is not is it tikkun or hafroda. It is tikkun al yedei hafroda. Tikkun is the general concept of all amitas malachas. Hafroda is the specific malacha of boiler. But to me, the question would be, separating what from what? Is it separating oichel from psoilus or one min from another? I think there's a raya from a tesefta from a brayse, Perek Yud Zayin, halacha vav. Nis'arav loy peres beperes. O bodok zeh b'fnei atzmoi, v'zeh b'fnei atzmoi, chayiv. I think the loshen bodok zeh b'fnei atzmoi, mezeh b'fnei atzmoi indicates it's not that he wants one min pre and he discards the other, or he puts the other away for a later time. נסערב לו פרס בפרס, ובודק זה בפני עצמי וזה בפני עצמי. That seems to deal exactly with what I described. So the almonds and the peanuts are mixed together. ובודק זה בפני עצמי וזה בפני עצמי. Tosefta says chayev. And that would be a raya. That even though you don't have oichel and psolis, but if you have shnei minim, that is defined as meleches boiler. Both Rav Mordechai Bennett and Mogen Novis. One of the great sforim on Malachas Shabbos is Mogen Novis of Mordechai Bennett, and I'm an Einikol of Rav Mordechai Bennett, and the Minchas Chinuch both. Wonder why doesn't the Taz bring a raya from Rashi? Ayin Dalad Omid Beis, Hayman de Ovid Tanura Chayev, and one of the Malachas is Chayev is Beirer, and Rashi writes, Beirer Hatzroirois Hagedoilem. He removes the big stones, and that is Beirer. So the Mordechai Bennett and the Minchas Chinuch writes, he's separating the big stones from the little pebbles. They're both the same mean. Both the same mean. Gedoiles metorchtanas, that's Beirer. So why would fish be different? He separates the big pieces from the small pieces. Like Rashi, he separates the big stones or the big rocks from the little pebbles. And that's Beirer. Lanias daiti, enkan raya klal. Rashi speaks about a person that wants to make tit or cement or any other solid material. And he does lisha from sand or dirt together with water and some other materials that coagulate, that make them like a dough. And that is how he makes the tanur. I think the kavanah of Rashi is he is separating the big stones from the offer, from the earth, from the dirt, not from the little stones. The little stones don't bother him. They will be part of the cement. When we make cement, we actually have little stones in cement, and it makes the cement stronger. But big rocks can be part of it. They don't stick in. And therefore, when Rashi says, he is boirer tzroides hagedolim, Kavonas Rashi is not tzroides hagedolim, it's tzroides haketanim, but tzroides hagedolim etoicha ofor, and that is shnei minim. That is shnei minim. So Rashi is not a raya at all. So sometimes when I am a yashiv kashas of achroin and people wonder, how does he have here? Some people will see it as courage, others will see it as chutzpah. And I'm apologizing all my life. Kachi darko shel Torah. Kachi darko shel Torah. So I'm not going against the Minchas Chinuch. I'm going for the Taz. The Minchas Chinuch wonders, how come the Taz doesn't bring Rashi? Did the Taz forget Rashi? How could he oversee a Rashi? And I say, no, the Taz didn't oversee any Rashi. The Taz was Boki Barashi. So I'm not rejecting the Minchas Chinuch. I'm Yash of the Taz. So how could the Taz not bring a Raya from Rashi? There is no Raya from Rashi. Because Rashi's Kavon is not Boirer Tzores Gedolim Perch Tzores Ketanim, but rather Boirer Tzores Gedolim Mitoicha Ofor. Tzores Ketanim don't bother him. That'll be part. Tzores Gedolim interfere, that it won't be proper done with big stones. So he's just removing the big stones from the Ofor, and that is Shnei Minim, not Min Echod, Veloy Kosher Mide Alatas. So this is number one, Hagdara number one that I wanted to share with you because it's very important. It's regarding the very essence of Malachas Beiram. And our sugya number two. So it's mavor in the Gemara that find out Beirer oichel mitoich psoiles biyad lo bekli lechol alta velo lachas man is muta lachatchila. But if one of these basic three components, it's not oichel mitoich psoiles, but rather psoiles mitoich oichel. It's bekli, not biyad. Lahaniach velo lechol, it's an issa diurais. This is interesting and fascinating. We need three shinuyim to make it mutalachat chala. If one of the three is missing, it's not. It's the bonus and it's the diurais, and that's a gewaldige chiddush. Rashi writes, and derech breira. Does Rashi mean kelachar yad? Nowhere else in Hilchas Shabbos do we find that one shinui is not enough to be matya. We need 1, 2, 3 different shinuim. There's no such a thing. If each of these is a shinui, why do we need 3? If each into itself is not a shinui, what would it help if there are 3? So to me, it's a pshitas. We're not dealing with kalachiyad. It's not the same concept at all. It's not the same concept as kalachiyad. Biyad v'loi b'kli, one could argue is kalachiyad. Oichel mitech psoiles v'loi psoiles mitech oichel, one could define as kalachiyad. But lechol la'alter or laniach le'ach hazman has nothing to do with kalachiyad. You're performing the malacha in exactly the same fashion, exactly the same way. The difference is only, do I intend to eat immediately or to put it away for a later time? So that has nothing to do with derech hamalacha. It's interesting to note, Oichel mitech psoiles, biyad, Rashi writes, not derech breira. Lechol la'alter ein ze derech haboirerim. Doesn't write it's not derech breira. Maybe that is significant. I say maybe. I'm not convinced, but maybe. Lechol la'alter has nothing to do with derech breira. It hasn't to do with derech asiyas hamalacha. You perform the malacha in exactly the same way, whether you eat it immediately or liach hazman. But it's not derech haboirerin. And why isn't it derech haboirerin? Why not? Rabbeinu Chananel is the key. Ayin daled omud beis. Rabbeinu Chananel writes, Boirer oichel mitoich psoiles biyad lechol la'alter ein kavanose lamalocha elo la'achile belvad. Ein kavanose lamalocha elo la'achile belvad. What do you mean? But yes, kavanose lamalocha. It's not a dover sheyeh mischaven. He's doing exactly what he intends to do, and what he intends to do is separating the oichel from the psoiles. So it is clear that Rabbeinu Chananel doesn't mean dover sheyeh mischaven. There's a new yesod in this halacha. Chazal ba'oimek das kodsham, ba'oimek binosam u'beruach kodsham are machadish. Derech achila and derech malacha are 2 different things. And any malacha that a person performs, b'shas achila, samuch la'achila, is not a malacha. Just 1 week ago, I brought the difference between malachas Yom Tov and malachas Shabbos. Yom Tov, the Torah only asks malachas avodah. Shabbos, the Torah asks kol malacha. And he explained, there are malachas that are in the earlier stage, preparing foodstuffs for storage, ikar tzurosam, and there are malachas that people performs, before consuming. But the third gather is samoch la'achila mamish. If it's samoch la'achila mamish, Chazal say, at least regarding b'orah, it's not defined as a malach. And that is the heter of oichel mitoich psoilis biyad lechol la'alter. That is defined as derech achila, not derech malach. So there's a huge discussion in the poskim when we eat fish. So some fish are very mesudar. Salmon, mushed, all their bones are in the center. Some fish have bones everywhere. I don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu made them that way. Carpion, you have bones everywhere. As if Kadosh Baruch Hu just threw in 150 bones in every fish, and you find them just wherever you wouldn't expect to find them. Anyway, there's a big discussion of poskim. How do you eat fish? So most poskim say you can't take the bones out of the fish. You need to hold the fish. So Hasidim eat fish with their fingers, but it's mutter to use a fork. And you need to remove the fish from the bone and not take the bone out of the fish. Because it's only mutter if it's oichel metoich psoilis, biyad, and lechol alta. So this has nothing to do with kalachiyad. This is a new concept. Derech achile is mutter, it's not defined as a malacha. Rabbeinu Hananel explains this. It doesn't mean that kavona in the understanding of the Hashem Chamim. He means it doesn't have the tzura, it doesn't have the essence of a malacha, it's derech achila. So even Shabbos, the Torah asad malachas that are samach lachila, but not bederech achila. Not when it's samach lachila mamish and it's bederech achila. I think we find the same in the Ritva. Ritva HaChadoshes, not the old Ritvas. Today we know that what was considered the Ritva for many years is Rabbeinu Kreskas. There's a new Ritva, which is the original Ritva, and the Ritva writes in our Sugya, Einoi nereke boirer, elo kenoisen letoich piv. And that is the same as Rabbeinu Hananel. Derech Achile is not defined as a malach. The most powerful example would be Toichen. So in Simin, Shin Chof Aleph, Boirer is Shin Yutes, Shin Chof Aleph is Toichen. Shin Chof Aleph, the Beis Yosef quotes the Chuvas Rashba. The Rashba writes, by Toichen there's also a heter of Lechol Alta. So you could cut a very small salad if you intend to eat it immediately. The Ran is Choylek and the Rashba were Machmer Kedivrei Aram. But according to the Rashba, we learn Toichen from Boirer. So how could you eat? How could you eat? You have molars in your mouth. And before you swallow your food is crushed. So the teeth in the beginning of your mouth are the cutters, and the teeth in the side of your jaw are the molars. And that is Toichen. That is Toichen. That's the essence of Toichen. Kuli al memoidim, what happens in your mouth cannot be defined as a malacha. That is eating. That's not a malacha, that's eating. Kuli al memoidim, what happens in your mouth is definitely not defined as a malacha. That is achila, not a malacha. So the chiddush of lechol le'alto is an extension, even though it's not in your mouth, it's in your plate. But boirer oichel mitoich psoilis, biyad, lechol alta, that's derech achila. But toirer loy osra, derech achila. The Rashba learns Toichen from boirer. The Ran disagrees. We find this concept only by boirer. But why do I bring Toichen as an example? Because I just want to stress this yesod. How could you eat dvorim sheyesh b'hem Toichen? In your mouth it's Toichen. No. Achila is not a malacha. So the chiddush of boirer oichel mitoich psoilis miyad lechol yalter is an extension of this avon, of this yesod. It's derech achile, not derech malacha. And that is clear in the Ben Chanan and the Ritva. And I think there's no other way to understand it. Because this explains why we need all these three components. Oichel mitoich psoilis, biyad, lechol yalter. If you use a kli, that's derech malacha. If you take the psoilis out of the oichel, that's derech malacha. And we can't argue with Chazal. We just need to understand what Chazal say. And that is the yesod. So the Rashba says the same yesod would apply to Toichen. A gewaldige chiddush, Ginaz Vrodim. Ginaz Vrodim was a chief rabbi in Mitzrayim 350 years ago. One of the Choshev Achronim. Ginaz Vrodim Oirechayim, Klal Gimel Siman Gimel. he has a huge discussion, could you make coffee on Shabbos? The very first sources dealing with making coffee on Shabbos is the Guinness Vrodim. And the Guinness Vrodim brings various shuas from other Gedolim, his contemporaries. And the Guinness Vrodim is Mekel. And one of the Yesoidis of his kula is a Gevaldige Chiddush Shaloi Motzinu, B'shum Poisek Acher. The Guinness Vrodim says, by coffee there is no Isra of Bishul, because it's always la'alter. You drink coffee when it's hot. You don't make coffee for an hour from now. And it's la'alter, it's not a malacha. I don't recall any other source that applies the logic of la'alter to bishul. Regarding Teichen, the B'siyaiser brings the machlokes Rashba and Ran. But bishul is a gevaldige chiddush. And the Guinness Vrodim is not definitive about it. It's one of the svaras he writes to be makel regarding coffee. The Ika discussion is bishul. Bishul, I don't want to get into it. Maybe one will learn mevashel, in a few weeks from now. We'll speak about this as well. But the Guinness Vrodim is a gavaldige chiddush, and he applies the kula of la'alta not only to Bורer, which is a sugya mefareshes, not only to Teichen, which is a machlokes Rashba and Ran, but to mevashel as well. And I do not recall other sources that say the same. So what I wanted to explain is the heter of Bórer, oicher mitor psoilis biyad, lechol has nothing to do with kalachiyad. If it would have to do with kalachiyad, it would be impossible to understand. Why do we need three different yesoides? The yesoid is derech achila is not the derech malach. And because this is such a big chiddush, we can't just apply it across the board. Ein lanu elo divrei chachamim. So in the Gemara we find this specifically by Bórer. Teichen is a machlokes Rashba and Ran, and we are machmer kedivrei Ran, that there is instead of Teichen even lechol yalter, and the gevaldige chiddush of the Guinness Vrodim, that it applies to mevashel as well. I would like to address a halacha l'maaseh question. Is there Bórer by begodim, sforim? I already mentioned utensils. So in the drawer you have forks and spoons and big spoons and small spoons, everything tossed together would be there in Isra Bórer. The Mishnah Berurah maintains that even by Sforim and Begodim there is an Isra of Bórer. Siman Shin Yud Sif Koten Tesvav by Mishnah Berurah. The Aruch Shulchan feels the same. Shin Yud Sif Ches. And many Achronim. Tshuvas Maharashag, Reb Shimon Greenfeld, one of the greatest Gedolim in Hungary. I love his tshuvas. He's very original and he's a bulldozer. Doesn't have a spilus. He goes with his svaras. He's choylek and achronim. That's not the reason I like him, but it's very, very convincing. He's a big bal svara. Reb Shimon Greenfeld was semi-hayaruf. He was a talmid of the Maram Shik. And he writes, Ma'olam lo shomanu v'lo re'isu etzel raboisai. They should be machmir, Bórer by sforim or begodim. And this is testimony which is very significant. Because Reb Shimon Greenfeld was Mishamish the Maram Shik. And the Maram Shik was one of the greatest Talmidim of the Sam Sofer. If the Maram Shik would see this Chumre by the Sam Sofer, clear as daylight, he would be Machmir. If he would be Machmir, Reb Shimon Greenfeld would know about it. And he writes, Loru isi etzel boisai. The Mishnah Berurah, the Aruch Shulchan, the Gedolim in Lithuania were Machmir. Kimilse de Pshit. The Mashag deals with the question, why? So I think the basic source would be Yerushalmi, but I prefer first sharing with you two Yesoides, the Or Sameach and the Marashag. Or Sameach, Hilchos Shabbos Perek Ches, Halacha Yud Aleph, comes up with a big chiddush. And he says that there is no Isra Bórer only things shedarkom liois meurovim. So when you put nuts on the table, usually it's a taravis. You put fruit on the table, it's a taravis, and everybody stretches out his hand and he takes what he wants to take. That's beirer. But things that you use entirely as private units, as separate units, ein darkom liois meurovim, there is no beirer. And that is why the Osamech writes, there is no beirer by Sforim or by Begodim. Sometimes they're mixed together. So when a lamdan learns, prepares a shiur, by the time he's through, oh, you have 50 Sforim on his table. Last week was the yahrzeit of Rav Ovadia Yosef. And usually the Motzei Shabbos before the yahrzeit, I'm invited by his family, by the Rishon LeZion, to say Divrei Hesped, because I had an extremely close and personal relationship. It was one of the great Gedolim of our time. So I just made a comment, and I said, Rav Ovadia Yosef had a huge status in Israel, in Israeli politics, in Israeli leadership. After all, he built a political party from scratch. He had such an impact on the Israeli tziburiut. But the eternal picture etched in everyone's mind is that huge table in Rehov HaKablan with Rabbi Avadia hunched over with his pen in his hand and writing with a zillion Sforim on the table. That table probably was made of solid steel, otherwise it would just crash. So sometimes Sforim are put together in a heap, but derech ha'olam is you have a Sforim shafer, and every sefer has his place. So sometimes, yeah, you come to winter and the entire family, everybody throws his coat on the couch, and then when they want to go home, everybody looks for his coat. But in normal circumstances in your home, every suit, every kaftan, every beged has its own hanger, and you don't need to separate. So the Or Sameach writes, there is no beirer, only by things like fruits, like nuts, like foodstuffs, that usually the derech ha'olam is that they're in a taroivis, and separation is required. But when separation is only required in an incidental way, but it's not derech ha'olam for things to be me'urev, there is no beirer. And that is why the Or Sameach writes, there is no beirer by begodim or by Sforim. That goes against the Mishnah Brura. Reb Shimon Greenfeld has a different approach, which to me has a lot of appeal, but because it brings us back to our previous shiur. And he says, we do not find the beirer only when the beirer is final. You do it once and that's it. Food, you beirer echel metech pseres. You could be beirer lechol alter or lechol yachazman. But once you do the beirer, that's final. We mentioned Rashi, Haiman de Ovid Chavita, Haiman de Ovid Tanura. So he separates the stones from the offer, and that's final, because he's going to use the offer to make tit, to make cement, to make clay. But anything that you're beirer, and then you mix them together again, that's not beirer. That's not beirer at all. And that's a gewaldige chiddush of a svara. So writes Begodim and Sforim, separate them now. Tomorrow they're going to be mixed together again. That's not beirer. So according to Reb Shimon Greenfeld, we have a kula, even by food utensils, eating utensils, there is no beirer. So you could separate the spoons, the tablespoons from the teaspoons, the mice from the forks, because it's not once and that's it. It's not final. That's a gewaldige chiddush of Reb Shimon Greenfeld to explain why the Maramshik wasn't machmir by begodim and by Sforim. What is the logic? What's the logic? What's the rationale? So last week I explained regarding dash. Why could we peel nuts? And why is it different than koitesh or dash? So I explained there are malachas. The essence of the malacha is giving the tzura to the pri, its basic form, its basic tzura. Grain is called grain only after threshing, only after disha. Before that, it's called, I don't know what it's called. So disha gives it its final tzura. I think that's the logic of the marshag of Reb Shimon Greenfield regarding bורר as well. So bורר is only if it's performed once and not again. That's bורר. So la'alta, you intend to eat it immediately, or lahaniach, but you're not going to mix it up again. That's Reb Shimon Greenfield's approach. It's a big chiddush. Regarding the Or Sameach, Rav Neuvet in Shmiras Shabbos Kilchoser brings up Shimon Zalman said, we can't rely on the Or Sameach lahalacha. I don't remember whether he brings the Marashag. I don't think I quoted where the Mishag is. Chelek Aleph or Chaim, two different shuvas, Lamed Zayin and Nun Dalet. Ibididi Talia, I wouldn't go that far because both the Or Sameach and the Mishag are bichedush. Lani is daiti. The question is, how do we define taroivus? And my opinion is based on a Yerushalmi Memtes on the Beis in Shabbos. You know, since I was very young, I've been learning a lot of Yerushalmi. So I think in my forum, there's relatively a lot of sources from the Yerushalmi. Naturally, not the Bavli, but so Memtes on the Beis Yerushalmi says, Cheskio says, there's bורר igul mitoch igulin, rimoin mitoch rimoinim. So an igul is a whole bunch of figs, dried figs, which are tied together. I don't usually see dried figs only to Bishvat, but I remember tens of years ago, decades ago, when I was young in America, there was the way they sold dried figs, it was like a vine, a piece of vine that was stuck through the middle of the thing and they were tied together. So Chazal speak about igulin. Maybe it's exactly what I remember. So the Yerushalmi says, if a person is bורר igul metoch igulin, rimoin metoch rimoinim, that's bורר. And the Yerushalmi asks, if so, maybe you're bורר one child from the others. It's also bורר. Wow. That brings a smile to your face, taking it to the extreme. So Baruch Hashem, I know families that have 15 kids, 15 kinderlach, and one is a year older than the other, and they all look the same. And out of their 15 or 16 or 18 children, they have two sets of twins or triplets, and sometimes it's mamish like bורר. And where the mother or father need to take Yankala and separate him from Pinchas and Moshe and Yossi and who knows, and Chanala from Rochel and Yenta and Sholamis. And so the Yerushalmi says, if you say there's bורר by Rimoin and by Yigulim, maybe by children, by kids, by people, Sosam v'loy perish. I think the Yerushalmi is a percha. Just like every bardas, every sensible person knows that there's no bורer by people, by children. That's not a taroivus. Yeah, you have 15 kids in the same room, in the same classroom, but every kid stands out, stands by himself. That's not a taroivus. Yerushalmi says, a pomegranate, is that a rimoin? It's too big. By avatichim, by watermelons, there is no bורer. That's not defined as a taroivus. When things stand out and there is no umnis and no tirche to separate, you just stretch out your hand and it's there. You don't need 20/20 vision to see what you want and what you don't want. That's not bורer. I think it depends on sheer size and on form. The essence of bורer is taroivus. And when a certain level of umnis and dikduk and terche is required, children are not a taroivis, igulim and remoinim, according to the Perchen Yerushalmi, that's not a taroivis. The same goes with garments, whether it's a dress or a suit, it's not taroivis, it's too big. It stands out for itself, even if it's in a heap. Okay, you just need to uncover it, but that is not defined as Brera. And according to the Marshag and Gedolei Hungaria, the same applies to Svarim. By Svarim, there is no Boiler. Every sefer has a name, every sefer has a cover, every sefer stands out for himself, and there is no need for diktuk and umnis. It's not defined as separation. It's defined as maybe selection, but not as separation. It's not a karoivis, and therefore there is no Isra of Boiler. Halacha l'maisa, minig oilem is to be machmer by the Mishnah Brura. I think yesh mokum god lahakel. The Mesilas of the Marshad is a very important one, and we explained in 3 different drachim why there would not be Boiler by Svarim or Begadim. The Or Sameach, the Marshag, and my understanding. I think my mahalach is posheter than the Or Sameach and the Marshag, and it's based on the Yerushalmi. So the question is, what size? I don't know. Like so many other things, I don't know. You just need to rely on your feeling. So by a rimoin, the Yerushalmi says no. How about an apple, which is slightly smaller than a rimon? How about a peach? How about an apricot? I don't know. By nuts, definitely yes. I don't know exactly how to put it, and therefore, regarding fruit, why not be machmer according to the Mishnah Brura? But if it's melons or watermelons, I definitely would be makel. So, kach nerelani is daiti. So regarding silverware, I would be machmer. According to the Marshag, no need to be machmer because the bread is not final. According to the Sameach, yes, I think there is reason to be machmir because most of the time in most homes in the drawer, it's all mixed up. According to my mahalach, there's room for chumrah because they are somewhat similar. You know, the big spoons, small spoons, forks, they're different but similar, and they're relatively small. So yesh mokum lachmir. Regarding begadim, I definitely would be makel because so there's room to argue begadim are different than svarim because sometimes suits are very similar. You have your Shabbos suit, you have a weekday suit, both are black. So maybe even though they're relatively big in size, but some dikduk is required, you know, to differentiate from one beggar to the other. So I think b'shas adchak yesh lahakel lachatchila, one should be machmir based on the Mishnah Brura. But I think even according to the Mishnah Brura, it's only when they're all thrown together. But if each suit is hanging on its hanger in the cabinet, in the closet, that definitely wouldn't be boiler. Because most of the time, you know, when it's relatively easy to take your Shabbos suit out, your weekday suit out, and I think even the Mishnah Brura wouldn't be machmir such in this case. So it was a pleasure to be with you today, like always. And today we discussed some very asidistic hagdoras and boiler, and I'm happy that we also discussed questions of halacha l'maisa.